Hey family, thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa, where only the strongest roots see the light. Brought to you by 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗃 Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, be sure to hit that subscribe button. What's up, Phil?
Hey man, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Everybody watching the chat, hopefully your Sunday is going well. And guess what? You know, if you guys want more, there's always our membership program. It's always available. There's a little button right under this video that says join. If you haven't joined our community, we have a lot of members already.
Yeah, shout out to the members. Yeah, and the classes too are actually doing pretty well.
That's right. What are you guys talking about upcoming, or what you recently talked about?
Yeah, Joseph Baba Ifa School.
Yeah.
You can't get any simpler than that, right? Easy to remember.
Yeah.
We have the 4-week curriculum going over songs, herbs, offerings, and simple vocabulary spiritually within Ifa. And then we also have the other module of the Mojubba, which is the initial invocation for all things Ifa Odisha. So those are the two that we brought out. And, it's been pretty packed houses. Even people taking classes on Saturday. The only time I went to school was ISS on Saturday. They had us in a room there facing the wall.
That's funny.
But you guys are dedicated, so it's a pleasure to have you guys on the weekends. So that's going well. And if interested in furthering your Ifa Odisha education, we're here to serve.
So on the singing ones, is there going to be like the karaoke bounce so we know what you're saying?
Well, yeah, we have the lyrics on the screen. Yeah, I don't know if I got to see if Erica, we can incorporate the bouncy ball that goes syllable for syllable. Yeah, of course.
Let's do that.
Ride like the wind, right? But definitely, yeah, and we're going to be more than likely coming out with more song classes because it was meant to, provide that entry-level exposure, but people are really trying to delve deeper into that. So really excited, just with its progression.
All right, so what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the Hand of Ifa, or the Mano de Orula, or Isefa Owofakan, or Esentaye 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁, however you want to term it. The first initiation into the spirituality of Ifa. Now, if you look back on our channel, there's been various videos that we've done on different aspects of what we're going to speak on today, but we wanted to go ahead and consolidate it and really delve into the different aspects of this ceremony, so you know exactly what to expect if you haven't gone through it, or what you should expect once you go through it, and maybe some red flags, right? Or maybe some things that are promising. Okay. So before we delve into all that, what is this process, right? The Hand of Ifa, as it's aptly named, and once you receive it, it becomes apparent why, is the first step within this spirituality. Now, they say that, and we have to kind of go back into some odus to be able to understand what happens here on earth. So when we go back to heaven, right, and we look at some of the processes that are occurring, the first one that's happening is two deities known as Odudua and Ogun are constructing our bodies from the toes to the neck out of minerals and clay, is what the scripture says. And this first part of the epic can be found in the Odu of Obeyono, or Obeogunda, Obeoriogunda. And once that's done, that body is empowered to be able to enter into the house of a deity known as Ayala, or Ijala, which is a path of Obadala, right? And this guy's whole job and spiel is to construct heads out of clay all day. So his house is just full of them, billions of them, right? And you, as a headless torso and body, are thrust and shoved into his home blindly to pick a destiny, right? And it's like the Odu Obeyono said, when the body first went in there, some tried to pick the biggest heads because they thought that had an advantage, but it also had its downsides. Some tried to pick the smallest, that had some downsides. And Obeyono just tried to pick one that felt right and, felt like it could be accommodated to. And when they put on the head, at that point, Ori and Ara, or head and destiny, and, condition, were now taken in front of Olodumare, the supreme creator, right? Sometimes you have to wait in line. Sometimes you're already at the front. So here we are. And the 𝗿𝗶𝗱𝗁 says that we are knelt in front of Olodumare to be presented. And Olodumare says, okay, It's your turn to live. Congratulations. You're a 1 in a trillion possibility. You're nothing short of a miracle. You know, what do you want to do on earth? And let's say you're like, I don't know, I want to be a Babalawos. And 𝗲𝗲𝗿𝗲 always says yes to whatever we ask. And he says, well, that's cool. You want to be a Babalawos. But to be able to get there, you have to go through this, and this. You know, all these occurrences. You know, and what do you offer as tribute? Because everybody has to offer something to be able to leave heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say at that point you're like, well, if my guardian angel is 𝗃𝗺, because 𝗃𝗺 is like, I'll take that head. And, you know, these spirits are like, I'll stand up for him. Let's say he's like, oh, I'll give a ram to my guardian Orisha, 𝗃𝗺. I'll give a ram to 𝗃𝗵𝗵, and I don't know, 4 white doves to 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲. And 𝗲𝗲𝗿𝗲 is, well, that's cool, but based on your destiny, I think we need another ram to 𝗃𝗵𝗏. Oh, man. So just like that, there's a gentleman there who's known as 𝗃𝗵𝗏𝗲𝗿𝗲, which is Orunmila, right? Who is he who sits next to 𝗲𝗲𝗏. That position was manifested in the Odu of Funnabe. And 𝗃𝗵𝗏 is the witness to destiny. So Orunmila is seeing all this go down. And he basically consults all of the key players, whether it's God Almighty, 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, your guardian Orisha, which in this theoretical case was 𝗃𝗺 for somebody, and your ancestors and guides to create an Odu, or identify an Odu that encompasses all this. So let's say your Odu was 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, right? So Orula wrote that down. And 𝗲𝗲𝗿𝗲 is like, all right, you got that all written down. We got an Orisha, we got a destiny, we got a body, we got these situations. All right, he's about to be born. Goodbye. See you in a little bit. And at that moment, you wake up, right? And what happens? As soon as we wake up, or we're born, we get spanked by the doctor. We start crying. They stick a needle in our butt to give us some vitamins, you know, which is horrible. And they start sucking all the gook out of our eyes, etc. And we're born, but we're crying because, you know, we're getting beat up as soon as we get here. And, you know, we just got kicked out of paradise, right? And the reason we remember none of what happened in heaven, because there's this fluid in our mother's stomach, the amniotic fluid, is known as 𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗏, which is the water of forgetfulness, right? So now we have a dilemma. We've remembered nothing from heaven. We need this information if we're going to have a decent life here, because we have a destiny to fulfill, and if we don't fulfill it, we have to come back in worse conditions. So Ori, which is the central part of our body, our head, was identified to be eligible for revelation for girls at 7 days old or for boys at 9 days old. So at least the way our ancestors did back in Africa, you know, accommodations were made immediately, and they were going to do the ceremony on that day. Some people over here in the Western world, we make it a little bit late, but it's never too late. My grandmother received Hand of Ifa at 84. Neither here nor there. At that point, you are taken to the Babalawos, or the representant of Orula on earth, to reveal the destiny that Orunmila wrote down for you in heaven, which is going to be revealed via the divination of 𝗃𝗃, right? Or the seeds of Ifa. So what happens? And this is public knowledge because anybody can go through an 𝗃𝗃 divination, right? And this might not necessarily be the case with a baby, because to maneuver a baby that way, I wouldn't recommend it. But ideally, what would occur is this. When you arrive for your life divination, right, which is known as Esentaye, which means my feet touch the earth and I'm given a name, or the 𝗃𝗵𝗿𝗲𝗍, where we find out what we're meant to do here on earth, 𝗃𝗵𝗿𝗍𝗍, or 𝗃, knowledge, 𝗍𝗍, on earth. Ideally, you would kneel and touch your forehead to the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, or the tray of Ifa. What happens at that very moment? Literally, everything in your brain is transferred onto that wood to where they become synonymous, where the tray literally represents the inner workings of your gray matter. When you sit down and, you know, various processes are done, however tradition, you know, dictates, to get to the point of, oh my God, we're about to pull the Odu, your 𝗃𝗃 are touched to your forehead, right? Now, this is in the Odu of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏. Why the instruments of divination must touch the forehead for the life divination or Ori to reveal itself, because that's the only way that the 𝗃𝗃 are able to identify and correlate with and become synonymous with our neurons, right? And our DNA and all the things that are going on in the atomic cloud of our brain trying to find the electron, right? So when you're looking at the Babalawo actually manipulate the seeds and hit it and all these different things, it actually represents our neurons, moving all the way around. And I think the best analogy is kind of like finding Neo in the Matrix, because a lot of people would say, well, when you're pulling, why are there so many missed pulls, or why do we have to pull so many times to put out a sign? Well, remember, we're going into the dark space of the brain. We're going into the subconscious and the pineal gland to be able to find this very key information, which is basically our spiritual double helix of DNA. And once we get through that and we pull the sign, with the 4 stratas or the 8 symbols, whether ones or twos that come out, at that very moment is like when they unplugged the back of Neo's head and he woke up. Because at that moment is when your actual real soul comes down from heaven to earth and penetrates your brain, right? You have awoken. You have been born anew, right? Amazing, right? Pretty epic stuff. But what happens then? Now that we're here and we're not just random organic matter walking around aimlessly without a purpose, now that we've assimilated that, now we have to do the same thing to you that they did to the baby. When a baby's first born, just like when an Odu is first revealed, they give it vitamins, injections, all these different things. When your Odu is revealed, all of those medicines are revealed as well, which were the same things that you promised as tribute in heaven before you got to earth, right? So that's what the recommendations from the Hand of Ifa are. And ladies and gentlemen, those are the most important recommendations you are going to do in your whole life. The Odu of Hand of Ifa is superior to any Odu that is ever going to ever be revealed for anyone. The closest one to that is the Odu singularly that is revealed via the Orisha that you crown during your Ita. But even that one is subject to the parameters of your Odunfa, right? So once again, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁 came out, hypothetically, you're a child of 𝗀𝗲, which we'll get into now with that identification, and all of those rams that you promised just came out there. So you can't be mad at the Babalawo as long as the Babalawo is being ethical and only trying to mark what is applicable. What do I mean by that? For example, in our specific way of divination, once we've been able to identify a prophecy, which is what comes out after the Odu, which is the famous 𝗃𝗍, Osobo, what kind of 𝗃𝗍, what kind of Osobo, at the foot of which Orisha, or what's the cause, or which Orisha defends. Once we come out with that, we identify automatically what it is that Orisha wants from you. In our specific lineage, we don't ask 𝗃𝗍𝗃, or any of those things. Automatically we have to give something to the Orisha, because no one's doing anything for free here. As much as 𝗀𝗲 and Eshu love us and all these different things, if they come defending you, like for example, if I have a bodyguard, I got to pay the bodyguard, I got to feed him, etc. So the Orishas are the same thing. So we always found redundancy, unfortunately, in the method of, okay, the Orisha came defending, let's ask if he wants anything. No, automatically give him something. Automatically, right? Once that's identified, and the 𝗃𝗏, which is the most important thing here, has been identified, because once the reason of the importance of 𝗃𝗏 is the 𝗃𝗏 is the medicine. 𝗃𝗏 is the offering that, based on your new rebirth, right, or your real birth, you are offering to nature so that nature starts to move in your direction. Before the 𝗃𝗏 from the Hand of Ifa is done, you are at odds with nature. And we're talking about a celestial body of a globe that's moving thousands of miles an hour, and you don't want to be in the opposite direction there, and you start seeing those effects through lack of fulfillment, lack of accomplishing goals, any of these things. So we got to get the 𝗃𝗏 done, right? Once we've marked 𝗃𝗏, at that point we try to close the divination, because you might have been able to get out of heaven pretty scotch-free. I've had people on the mat during their life divination for 4 or 5 hours. Horrible. But it happens, right? You have some people who come out with 1 recommendation. You have some people who come out with 10. But as long as you're just consistently trying to close it out as efficiently as possible, I mean, that's the debt that the person came with. Everybody comes here with different debts and different destinies and different obstacles to overcome. But that is what you, the recipient, promised to give on earth before you got here. So it's not the Babalawos' fault as long as he was ethical, right? after we get through that process, we're going to identify that guardian Orisha, right? Here we go. The Odu Osarosun, which I've cited multiple times amongst others, identifies why, if you are going to ask the guardian Orisha, it should be done via the divination method of Iking, because it is the most precise, based on it representing the neurons and all the things that are going on in the brain. The Erindi Logun cannot identify said information based on the limited scope within that parameter. It's not that obviously an Odu of Erindi Logun can identify a destiny. It can, just in a different scope and spectrum, not like Ifa does, because it's far more precise, right? If you're not going to use Iking, you might as well not ask at all. Just kind of crown whoever you want that's affiliated with an Odu, if you have an Odu at all. And we're going to also get into the importance of the Hand of Ifa based on the various positions that you can acquire afterwards, whether you want to be a Babalawo or not. Because, for example, let's say now that, the Hand of Ifa is done and you've fulfilled your obligations to Orunmila and your destiny, which were the recommendations that came out, right? At that point is when you're going to start seeing the benefits of your ceremony. So I've interacted with people, as many may know, that have come to me and said, hey, I have Hand of Ifa, I want to start working with you, or, based on situations, this is how I'd like to proceed. And, I always ask them the same thing. Let me see your Hand of Ifa paperwork. Tell me about your ceremony. What do you recall before, during, and after, right? And I think the most common thing that's occurring now is the majority of people have not done the things that came out in their Hand of Ifa. I do not blame the recipient, because they might not know any better because you're just starting. But I think what's occurring is the education process of the Awos is changing a little bit, where those recommendations are somewhat shunned for whatever reason. Maybe it could be because, unfortunately, at large, the majority of the brothers within the fraternity are not apt when it comes to 𝗿𝗏. I would say that
How come?
It's hard, brother.
Huh?
It's hard. To learn 𝗿𝗏 is hard. To learn the real 𝗿𝗏 is hard. You know what I'm saying? Like, in my case, it took me 7.5 months.
Jeez.
Because the 𝗿𝗏 has 60 verses. You know what I'm saying? And I'll never forget, and I'm just bookmarking in my mind so I don't forget what part of the video we were at. I'll never forget when I did Ifa. My godfather actually told me, he said, this is the 𝗿𝗏. You know how to sacrifice and everything already, because I knew how to do that before I went in the room. But he said, this is the 𝗿𝗏. From this point forward, you call me about this and nothing else. Okay. If it is not pertaining to the 𝗿𝗏, don't ask me about it, because you shouldn't be learning it anyway. So, by the grace of God and by the grace of Ogun Natetura, I was forced and shanghaied into learning 𝗿𝗏, which is the best thing that ever happened to me. Cause I have no regrets. I have no regrets in my selection of my lineage or my house. I learned things that, I've met many that haven't had the opportunity that now I'm able to teach them,
I was like that with radio. I was mad when our host of our show didn't show up and I had to do the shows by myself.
Yeah.
But that taught me so much.
Yeah, it's like learn how to swim. My godfather did the same thing to me, bro. I remember one time I had a Hand of Ifa over here, and I was coordinating to bring him up from Miami to direct it, and he's like, yeah, I can't go. I said, what do you mean you can't go? I need you. He said, you don't need me. You want me. I said, yeah, that too. He said, no, you do it. And I didn't. He explained to me later. He said, I needed you to swim, because I was very comfortable in that regard. I knew how to direct, but I was like, I like having him there, but he did that to me on purpose, and I thank God for him, and I thank God for the 𝗿𝗏 criteria as well, because if not, I would have never learned it, because a lot of brothers in the beginning, they'll look at the 𝗿𝗏 and be like, I'll get to that later. And then 20 years comes around and the brother still doesn't know how to do 𝗿𝗏. They start learning how to do head rogations or parado, or they're so quick to want to learn how to consult, which I actually, to a certain degree, understood the mechanics of it somewhat before going into the room, and I learned it simultaneously in the room before I even came out, so it just gave me that much more time for 𝗿𝗏. But because of this, I would say, and it breaks my heart, but I have to be honest, I think 95% of Babalawos don't know how to perform 𝗿𝗏 properly. Really? Yeah, within the Lukumi tradition at least. I can't gauge Isese, You never really know over there because the 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗶 varies over there as well. Like I've seen 10 different versions of the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, just like I've seen 10 different versions of the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 that 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, innovated here in the New World. So it's a huge epidemic, and you see it, especially when people come or they're displaced spiritually, and they're like, yeah, things are going horribly for me, but I never did none of this. And then it's like, okay, but they gave them a bunch of other deities, and they've invested thousands of dollars in other things, where it's like, oh, but we got to go all the way back to the beginning now, because the reason you're not seeing any of the benefits of the things you did after is because we didn't do the things that you promised to do in heaven first upon arriving on earth. So that's a huge epidemic. So until those things are done from your divination, like what's written on the paper, not just what's randomly advised and put in consejos, that's when you start really seeing the benefits. And that's technically when your Hand of Ifa ends. Because ideally, that same 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗶 that is marked should be done that same day. But based on time, based on possibly quantity of people, which we're going to get into that as well, or based on, not knowing what's going to come out, and the animal guy might have left, the farm by then, we do it at a later date where, something is done to circumvent that at that moment, protecting the person until they do it. But ideally, it should be done, within 3, I would prefer it not even get to 6 months, you know what I'm saying? But definitely within that year, because you want to start seeing those results, And these are all things you should know beforehand, because you have to understand, it's like with anything. Okay, I'm going to buy a house, and the house is $500K, whatever. But there's closing costs. Mm-hmm. There's inspection fees, there's insurance, there's all these other things. This is one of those things, those public hidden fees, right? So once you've gone through all that now, you have the Hand of Ifa now, congratulations. Based on gender, it now divides, right, as far as path. Ideally in the Hand of Ifa, you will kind of have an idea of where you want to go, or you may need a little more study to come to those conclusions. I'll start with the men, right, because they're less complicated than the women afterwards, because the women have more possibilities. But men, once you receive Hand of Ifa, your official rank is Owofakan. Another note here, someone with Hand of Ifa is not an aleyo, by the way. They are an initiated member of a house. The word aleyo means visitor, or he who we will not speak around. If you have Hand of Ifa, you are born from Ifa, you are a member of that home, and that home corresponds to you spiritually. So know your rights. You are known as Owofakan or Owofakan, which means one Hand of Ifa, right? And it's meant to be a stepping stone towards possible further goals, right? So for the gentleman that has the characteristics and doesn't come into trance, that wants to become Babalawos, you can, right? One of the prerequisites in our home to crown Orisha is to receive a gungun, being that it's the Orisha of the ancestors, and they play a huge role in any of the further processes that come. We prefer that the person have their own icon, so that's the icon that's focused on during the further ceremonies. And that goes for men and women, right? But once you have that, and this is synonymous with men and women before we start delving into specifics for men, at that point you are eligible for Orisha initiation. There is no time restrictions on how long you have to wait to crown Orisha. The restrictions really come from the schedule of the elders and you. It's really a matter of dollar and cents, to be frank with you. And having an upstanding reputation within your community. Because Orisha is not a free-for-all either. We want decent people in this organization. But let's say you have the funds to do the things from Hand of Ifa. You have the funds to do a gungun, and you want a crown, and you're able to do that. I mean, at that point, it's just a matter of planning. You have other houses who are like, hey, get a reading. You might have to receive this deity beforehand. These are all things that can come afterwards, to be frank with you, because all that money that you're investing towards that, you should just invest towards your Orisha, because no Orisha or situation or process is going to benefit you as much as you crowning your guardian Orisha. And everything else can come after. And at that point, you're already crowned. You might begin to see the ROI of all the money you've invested. You can start studying. You can start functioning. We can start pulling you to ceremony. You can start rolling, as opposed to just having you on the outside looking in, receiving a bunch of deities that you could receive afterwards or might not need at all, or doing a bunch of misas that you don't need to do because they're already included in the cost of Orisha, any of these other things. So ultimately, you can get to Orisha as quickly as your elder's schedule permits, right? At this point, we can start divvying. So for the men that choose to initiate into Orisha, right? Let's say, they want to become Babalawo. At that point, if you're accepted and your godfather of Ifa feels comfortable with you as a man in the community, we can move forward with that. And at that point, you're Babalao, off to the races. Start studying, please. But you also have gentlemen who aren't interested in becoming Babalawo, and let's say they want to become Oriate, right? Abore Orisa, or the master of ceremonies of Orisha, one of the most prestigious positions in our whole spirituality, that of respect. When you look at the Odu of 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗁𝗲, where Obatala tried to function without Orunmila, he lost his room. So you got to be careful with situations where, let's say you start in an Orisha house or an Orisha-centric house that doesn't incorporate Ifa or doesn't incorporate Ifa until a little bit later. You have to be careful because I've noticed a lot of brother Oriates, not all, but a lot will have their hand of Ifa, right? Beautiful, as it should be. But I notice when it's time for their god kids, some of them, to receive hand of Ifa, they're like, no, you don't need that. We'll pull out the guardian angel with the 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗁 or the shell, which is taboo completely. Or you don't need hand of Ifa. Hand of Ifa is just a deity. That Orula is just a deity or a 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗁. Orula is the whole religion. Orula is what makes all of this function. So it's interesting because the thousands of dollars that could be going towards Orunmila is going towards, I don't know, an Orisha Oko or an Olokun or something that the Oriate gives, right? Yeah. It does occur, but it's completely unethical, right? And the Oriate that does not have hand of Ifa is not blessed in their practice, period. So there's that, right? So make sure if you are going to go down the path of Oriate, have your hand of Ifa, all of these different things, and understand that that position is meant to learn from two positions, other Oriates as well as Babalawos. The old Oriates used to learn with Babalawos. A lot of them were trained by Babalawos originally. Now, you have this situation with the ceremony of the hands. I'm not going to get into that too much. I would love it if the Oriate has it done because it's protecting him and protecting the people he's working with, but you might not get an honest answer on that anyway. So I guess we'll talk about what unites us and not what divides us. But if you don't have it, you're putting yourself in danger as well. And you look at the brothers who don't, and you kind of see that deterioration, especially cuando están raspando mucho or they're shaving a lot and they're doing a lot of santos, you start seeing their health deteriorate. So you want to protect yourself, brothers and sisters, because females can become oriates as well. The woman has the right to direct ceremony and throw the 𝗃𝗿 in Ita. No questions asked. A lot of the originals were women. But the Odu 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗁𝗲 speaks of when the female oriates had male students, and a lot of them usurped the power due to machismo and etc. And some women wanting to delegate that rather than having to, perform certain processes. But for the women that want to, the position is yours with full support. So there's that. Or you have someone that wants to become Olorisha, right? That doesn't want to become a master of ceremony, but wants to practice, perform services, give deities, maybe crown other people, any of those things. That's perfectly fine. You have the people who don't want to crown Orisha, that maybe want to focus on, ancestor worship or being spiritual mediums, right? Orunmila is going to benefit any of these positions because when you have your destiny manifested and revealed and stabilized, it's going to benefit everything. When you have hand of Ifa, you literally can go from one day hearing nothing to the next day hearing everything or seeing everything from a mediumship standpoint. Obviously, there's a fine line between spirituality and fanaticism, but through your elders, you'll be able to identify, am I receiving legitimate stimuli or, am I just, taking in more than I can handle, right? Mm-hmm. So that's between houses. And then you have the people who just have hand of Ifa who really don't want to do anything other than fulfill their debts with Orula and go about their lives. I've met people, even people with 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗁 or the king of Ifa, right? In their hand of Ifa that never crowned or did Ifa or anything like that, 100 years old when they passed away. Beautiful lives. So the most important thing is not crowning or doing Ifa or doing any of these other things, The most important thing is fulfilling your obligations to what you've received, as well as 𝗵𝗶𝗍. Orisha can save lives. Ifa can save lives. But what really saves lives in the most efficient manner is 𝗵𝗶𝗍. So sometimes a lot of people don't even want to receive the Hand of Ifa because they're worried that they're going to be told that they have to crown and do so immediately, because if not, them or their children or their family are going to die, right? No one dies here. And if they are dying, they call 911, because there's no such thing as spiritual emergencies. The beauty of Ifa and the constructs of this divine spider web is that everything is preordained and planned. So there's no emergencies. Everything's already thought out. But the thing here is that, being that these are huge ticket items in the tens of thousands of dollars, you know, it might tempt somebody into trying to persuade the client a little more and be like, yeah, you need this right now or something horrible is going to happen. Oh my God, here's the money. When in reality,
out of fear.
Yeah, you know, just like, God forbid, a medical professional. This is how unethical this is. A medical professional. Yeah, you know, you got a little issue with this valve, but do open heart surgery for $100,000 and, you know, it'll resolve the issue. Well, maybe I'd be able to resolve the issue with some prescription medication, right? Rather than having to cut me open and jeopardize my life.
Or diet change, right?
Exactly. You know, maybe we should go walking 5 times a week. You know what I'm saying? So it's the same thing with these concepts, because rather than having to crown and do all these big deities and things like that, just perform 𝗵𝗶𝗍. Whether it's 𝗵𝗶𝗍 from the Erindi Logum, because the shell does have an 𝗵𝗶𝗍, even though the majority of people want to recommend receiving deities because they're higher ticket items, it's more productive to perform 𝗵𝗶𝗍 that's marked, or do an 𝗵𝗶𝗍 on the tray of Ifa from your 𝗲𝗲 or sign. Let's look into the 𝗲𝗲 and let's utilize this information that we have to save somebody, you know? And you could do it with drastically less money. Let's say the most insane 𝗵𝗶𝗍 in the world might cost anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500. And we're talking about multiple 4 legs, things that are pre-written in the book. That's a lot better than, you know, $20,000 to crown Orisha plus. So, and maybe that person doesn't want to crown. Maybe they resolve their issues and they take the Orishas and throw them in the garbage. You just don't know. But we're really tired of seeing this happen. So it's better to do things that are more accessible to the client, that aren't motivated by greed and intention, and everybody goes home happy and healthy, you know? So we're going to get into red flags before we get into the female aspect of things. But that's a huge red flag. When you see that pressure and whatnot, you have to really be careful there, because when does it end? Okay, because here's the thing. If I can press you out of $20,000, what else can I press you out of? Yeah. How much more you got in there? You know, how many more times can I threaten your life with spirituality until you give it up? So you got to know when to cut it, you know, and sometimes the people we start the movie with don't make it to the credits. And sometimes from the very beginning, from the moment of initiation, we might not be meant to move forward with those elders, you know? So we have to be very careful. Before we get into red flags and the female aspect of things, what are your obligations once you have Hand of Ifa, right? On an annual basis, in my humble opinion, you should be doing an 𝗵𝗶𝗍 on the tray of Ifa from your 𝗲𝗲, right? 𝗵𝗶𝗍 means sacrifice, but usually when we're talking about 𝗵𝗶𝗍, we're not talking about the random fruit or offering to a place in nature rather than an Orisha, which is completely taboo. You should be offering to the Orisha via somebody that's initiated if you don't have it yourself. Because no matter what 𝗲𝗲 you pull in your annual reading, it's always under the umbrella of your 𝗲𝗲 of Ifa. So let's say you're Ofun Topola or Ofun Otura. And let's say that year you came with 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, right? And you did all the things from your annual reading. If you don't do the 𝗵𝗶𝗍 from your 𝗲𝗲 of Ifa, the 𝗲𝗲 or the recommendations from the 𝗲𝗲 of the year are not going to be as efficient, right? So I'm very honest with my clients, just like they are with me. I'll be like, what do you want to do this year? They're like, well, to be honest with you, we only have the means for one 𝗵𝗶𝗍 this year. I'm going to say, hey, you might want to hold off on the reading. Let's just get an 𝗵𝗶𝗍 done from your sign. And if nothing crazy is going on, and this is for maintenance anyway, you're going to see results. And if something crazy happens, then we'll do a reading, you know, if that's their situation. You have other people who are like, no, I'm good economically. I want to invest in myself spiritually. All right, let's do the annual reading. Let's see what comes out there. Let's do that. You want to do an 𝗵𝗶𝗍 from your sign? All right, awesome. You know, you have Orishas. Ideally, we would feed Orula once a year, the warriors once a year. Just based on this level, maybe you want to feed Ori once a year. You can space these things out as well every 3 to 4 months. Maybe you want to do a Misa. I mean, then that's a really stimulated spiritual year, you know? That's quite a bit. But bare minimum, get with your Babalawo and do an ebo from your Odu. Because you could do all these other things. It's all about efficiency, people. Like, we could do a bunch of exercises for chest, but if we don't do no bench press, we're not going to see no growth. So it's the same thing here. The ebo is the bench press. The ebo is the squat. The ebo is the deadlift. This is what works. You know, all these other things, they're great, but they are auxiliary. Ebo, ebo, ebo. Because now you have an Odu that you have to answer to and a destiny that you must obey. So, red flags in the Hand of Ifa. There's a trend that's been going on for the past, I don't know, whatever, of huge amounts of people receiving Hand of Ifa at once, right? The Odu of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗍 says that only 8 people at most should receive Hand of Ifa at once. This concept is also in the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗍𝗲. And why? When we give Obi to Orunmila, like the Odu Ofun-Sa says, it is a simultaneous cast, right? Babalawo on the right, Babalawo on the left. When we cast Obi to Ifa that day, there are 8 pieces of coconut that are going to manifest there. And those are the 8 destinies that Orunmila is eligible to bring down that day. If the coconut that is provided to be able to bring down the destiny of the person with their life reading is not from that cast, it's not that it's not legitimate, but Ifa says it's taboo because it puts that person at a natural disadvantage. So, for example, let's say said person wants to do 9 Hand of Ifas, right? 10 Hand of Ifas, anything over 8. Let's just say 9 because it's the one closest to 8.
Okay.
We threw 8 pieces of coconut, right? Let's say alafia both sides, all white up, orula mai boru, we go all through, right? Beautiful. But once those 8 pieces of coconut are used up, being that it's 1 per person, the 9th person, now we just got to get a random piece of coconut and put it. But Orula's like, that wasn't one of the ones that I answered with. You know, that person wasn't taken into account to a certain degree. So their Hand of Ifa is legitimate, but it's going to make things much more difficult for them because it's like, let's say we go to surgery and we use a scalpel that wasn't sanitized initially. We might have some chance for infection there. It's the same concept, right? My grandfather in Ifa, one of the teachers of my godfather, before we actually get into that, gentlemen, there's another Odu I want to mention. In the Odu of Ikasa, it says that Orunmila should never consume more than 16 hens at a time, right? So if someone goes to receive Hand of Ifa, and the most common offering is 2 hens per person, 2 Ifa. If we have a 9th person, that's number 17 and 18. And when you look at the Odu of Ikasa and the Pataki, where Orunmila ingested more than 16 hens and it caused him to regurgitate and not recognize his children, you know, this is something we want to avoid. Right? We have to be very careful here because even though that person at the end of the day went through their divination, made pertinent sacrifice, etc., it's still taboo. You know, they have Hand of Ifa, but you're putting them at risk for spiritual phenomenon because Orunmila at that point, his attention is not there. And this is scripture. This is not me coming up with this. This is not some random book. This is in the 𝗃𝗍𝗏. So if someone hasn't seen this, they haven't opened the book. To the point where to be able to give the last 2 hens, 15 and 16, and I won't reveal that here, there's a special process that could be incorporated there to alleviate that. But once again, it ends at 16, right? So the 9th person, that's over 16. So once again, Ifa bases itself on 3 Odus at a time. 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶, 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗏, and Ikasa says that it shouldn't be more than 8 people at a time. Now, my grandfather in Ifa, very storied Babalao in Havana. His name is 𝗃𝗶𝗿𝗄. He's one of the teachers of my godfather. And I'll never forget when I was at the point where I was going to start giving Hand of Ifas a long time ago now, 10 years ago. You know, I was trying to see, like, I was, you know, you start to be like, hey, I want some Ihalos. I got a couple people ready. You know, what are my limits? This, that, and the third. And I'll never forget, my godfather told me, he said, don't do more than 4. And I said, well, you know, you see these plantas, padrino, like, you know, forgive me, you know, could you explain? He said, the thing is this, right? You could do up to 8. We have that present, right? You have some people that do more than 8, which we don't agree with and we don't do. But for the people that, let's say, do 8, you've worked plantas in my house and you've directed plantas in my house. How do you feel? You know, the times that we've gone to other places and directed for other people that are doing 8. I'm like, yo, Padrino, by the time we're done, I'm exhausted. I won't even wake up the next day. You know, I'll be in bed till like 2, 3 in the afternoon, you know, depending on when we finish. He's like, exactly. So imagine if you cut that work in half, how would you feel? I said, I'd feel all right. I think that, especially being that we don't do more than 1 tablero at a time, which is what 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 says, it's 1 tablero, and the padrino should be the one pulling the 𝗃𝗲𝗿, because it's his responsibility. If he's the one who took the money and is going to spend it, he should be the one taking the risk and pulling the sign to be able to protect himself via 𝗃𝗏 from the repercussions of the 𝗃𝗲𝗿 that's going to be pulled by the hijado. You know, all these different things, 4 people would be more accessible. And I was like, you know, you're right, because you want to at least give an hour per person. In Ita, you want to be able to evolve the 𝗃𝗲𝗿, converse it, allow the brothers to speak with tranquility, not be rushing through things. You know, there's another aspect of this. You're talking about 16 hens, 8 roosters, all these different things. You know, there's certain things that have to happen to all of those. Who's going to have the energy to do that? You know, how many people are you going to have to contract? You know, there's a lot of components that are going on here, where in reality, the majority of houses, you know, which is horrible because 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 speaks the complete opposite, they'll just throw away the animal altogether and just get some food from the thrifty, you know? So I was like, I think I'm leaning towards 4, you know, the maximum 5, because, you know, sometimes, you know, couples, you know, and he said, that's 𝗃𝗿𝗏's criteria. You know, we don't do more than 4. And it's always been a really nice rotation. We finish at a decent time. And even with all of that, we're finishing at midnight. You know what I'm saying? If we're starting Ita at around 8:39, you know, and we're not blazing through it because we don't want to kill ourselves because we're exhausted already, you know, we're still finishing super late. So I look at these houses that do 8 people plus, and I'm like, what's going on there? You probably have 3 or 4 tableros open. You got 8 to 10 Babalawos. You're literally giving the person their sign if they're lucky enough, if you didn't forget. There's no energy at that point, you know, of, hey, we're about to pull out the guardian angel, let's get some witnesses in here, or hey, we're pulling out the 𝗃𝗲𝗿, let's be silent, you know, a protocol, you know, of how things used to be. Because I'm not old school, but the people that raised me and trained me were. And, you know, I wasn't around the viejos, but I was around mayores. So, you know, there was always a protocol. There was not this desperation for the dollar or for hijados or any of these things, because every person that you initiate is your responsibility at that point if you're going to do it correctly. Because you have some houses where it's a numbers game, which, you know, hey, to each his own, but we're all about quality. That's what's really separated our establishment is Botanica Candles and More. I mean, it's basically A1 ironclad, you know. If you receive things here, you know it's done correctly and you can go to sleep at night, because Lord knows I am, because we did everything to the book, to the T, even more so.
I know, so that's right.
This is how we do it. That's why we have the response we do online or in the real world, in this fraternity, and in this religion. So that's that, right? Red flags. Another red flag before we get into the specifics about the women. And the reason I'm leaving the women for last is because they're the most important out of this whole process, ladies. So please bear with me. After your Hand of Ifa, ideally, well, first off, you should be leaving with all your orishas when Ita is done. You should have all your santos. You should have everything. Nothing should be staying there. You paid for it. The transaction is over. Please take your orishas, because Lord knows your elders and your godparents have enough in the house. Please take your things. Congratulations. Within 2 weeks after that, and, you know, our schedule's pretty occupied, and I'm still able to accomplish this. Within 2 weeks, you should have the information on your sign for you to do independent study. You should have all the results written out along with costs. Information on your guardian orisha. You should also have an appointment set up for you to come in or virtually learn how to take care of your orishas if you live at a distance. All of these things for your records written out completely, possibly even a photo of the divination literally, because, you know, things happen and you need these things for your records, because this is your spiritual life and health at jeopardy. If not, because your whole spiritual life before crowning Orisha or doing Ifa is based on two pieces of knowledge: your guardian Orisha and your life Odu of Ifa. That is it. As long as you have those two things, we'll be able to alleviate your destiny and make life better. Without it, what can we do? Another thing, Hand of Ifa cannot be given twice. This is a once-in-a-lifetime perfect moment. So you need that information. You paid for that information. There's no reason for you not to get it. And if not, take whatever measures necessary to get that information, because without it, you know, I've felt horrible. There's been times when people have come into the store and they're like, hey, you know, I had a bad experience. I really don't want to interact with people. I'm like, unfortunately, you have to, because there are some houses that are like, yeah, we'll just pull a new sign. There is no new sign. This is once in a lifetime. So whatever it takes, you get that information, you know? So yeah, there's that. Now, the ladies, right? Once you have Hand of Ifa, your rank is that of Ikofa or 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍. Ikofa means I'm able to learn Ifa, because the woman, after having Hand of Ifa, is able to learn all of the things within her position, based on gender within that ceremony. Where the man with Owofakan, based on him being a man and not a Babalawos, there's parts of the ceremony he can't be involved in. Where all of the feminine aspects of the ceremony, you are privy to and ultimately dominate, right? I want to make a very key point here is Ifa is always about empowerment. We're living in a modern time where certain things are misinterpreted, and we have to understand that Western interpretation can sully old world concepts, right? So when we look at the woman or the 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍 serving the table of the Hand of Ifa, Western criteria and upbringing would make someone think, oh my God, look how they have this woman in servitude. Look at the mistreatment, all of these other things. On the contrary, she is that of nurturer. She is that of caretaker. She is ensuring the safety and benefit of the ceremony. As a young man, right, I remember when holidays or any of these Sunday dinner, any of these things, men were not allowed in the kitchen, you know, and I personally didn't feel like my rights were obstructed upon or I was being marginalized, you know. I mean, my uncles, when they would put a finger in the pot, they get smacked. Like, that was just normal. We were not allowed in that space. You know, that space was dominated by women who were ensuring that we were going to be nourished and we were going to be well. The table was served by women, was created and manifested by the women, my aunts, my grandmother's sisters, all of these matriarchs that we had and that we admired. So when we look at something like the role of 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍 in the Hand of Ifa, that the woman, as soon as she initiates, is able to learn, it is that of facilitator, completely. And when you look at the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗁, where through the loyalty and obligation that the woman felt towards Ifa, she saved Orula's life, because being that she was the one who's serving, she was able to see the treachery of one of the brothers there who stuck a bone in Orula's piece of fish, or, you know, decided to leave it in there. She was able to tell him, hey, don't eat that. It'll kill you. So that's why the 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗍 who's running the table is the only one who's able to handle the plates, etc. So it is not by any means a marginalization of the feminine. It is actually empowerment, because that is completely y'all's, right? Another task that could be fulfilled, and this could be learned by both genders as well, is the processing of the animals and all that goes into that. I don't want to get into too much detail because, you know, that is ceremony, more crucial ceremony in my opinion. But you can learn how to process the animal in ceremonial fashion and whatnot, right? The woman has the right to learn all of her odu based on, you know, what is privy to non-initiate Babalawos, right? People who aren't Ifa Babalawo. But all of that information has to be made privy to her. As well as all of the other things that go into the ceremony, as far as the nuances and the things that can't be quantified by a piece of paper or a song. You know, there's so many other things that go on in a properly done Hand of Ifa, you know. So all of those things, right? The Hand of Ifa is usually, for most people, the most important process that anyone's going to go through spiritually within Ifa Orisha. It is meant to be the first step before a second good step on a very long and fruitful path. Without the Hand of Ifa, we are lost. our true self is left in heaven. Like, I've had people that came from houses that didn't interact with Awo, and, you know, they crowned Orisha and things like that, no Hand of Ifa, whatnot, and they haven't seen 20 years later the benefits of all of the investment and energy that they put into their spiritual selves. They come, I've been very humbled, I've initiated people with very, very large Orisha stints and amounts of years. And they're like, I'm ready for my Mano de Orula because nothing else is working. You know, I got this deity and that deity, and I got Oya's sister, and I got the family of Shango, and I got Aina 3 times, and all these other things. And they're like, you know, I'm giving money and money and money, and the animals are dying, and there's blood everywhere, and I'm going and getting worse. And we give them the Hand of Ifa. And that's not to say that the ceremonies that were done by the brother Olorisha weren't done correctly, but there's a protocol and a process and a sequence. And we give them the Hand of Ifa, and just like that, all of the blessings coming up from 20 years to that point hit all at once. And they're like, wow, Joseph, I've been waiting for this for decades. And I'm like, it's literally like a backed up pipe. You know, if we skip Orula, there's going to be that blockage, you know, and we're just piling and piling and piling stuff on it. You know, it has to be resolved. The 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗲𝗁 says no one should arrive at the door of Orisha without Orunmila. That was when Oshun was carried by Orula and 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗁 to the door of the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, right? Another point I'd like to make, because there seems to be sometimes a little bit of a misinterpretation or misconstruence. The word 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 makes reference to the room of Ifa. 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, the grove of 𝗿𝗲. 𝗿𝗲 is the central energy that resides within the consecratory room of the Babalawos. Perfect. But the room of Orisha is known as 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, right? 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, right? The grove of the throne. And for those who understand, if you know, you know. So when people say 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 ni Osha, it's a little bit of a contradiction because 𝗿𝗲 would never be in the room of Orisha, nor Orisha would be in the room of 𝗿𝗲. So that's another point I'd like to make as well. But no one should arrive at the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 without Orunmila. The 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 cannot function without Orunmila. 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗍 says this. 𝗃 says this. The shadow of the Awo will be upon every Orisha ceremony, just like the shadow of the Olorisha will be upon every Ifa ceremony. There's not one Ifa that's done where an Olorisha is not present, or a Hand of Ifa where an Olorisha is not present. This has never happened in the history. We cannot eliminate each other. So I think that's very key, and there is no replacement for the Hand of Ifa. But with it, the person will be awakened, they will be aligned, and they will know their true selves to identify what it is that they chose to dedicate themselves to here on earth to be able to lead them to happiness.
Oh, man.
Poof.
What would you say? So let's just say we had a volume,
and it's
right?
None of y'all's business if Phil has Hand of Ifa or not. Stop asking me.
You know, it's already in the chat. Where in the volume of Joseph teachings Ifa, right? Where would you say the Hand of Ifa is in the volume, like a volume number of this episode? Where would it lie if someone was new to Ifa? What video sequence would this be?
This is the first video they should watch.
Gotcha. So we are definitely going to boost this.
This is the most. This may possibly be, apart from, and this is even more important. This is the most important video possibly we've ever made. As far as influence, as far as what it can prevent, as far as what it could provocate. I mean, without this knowledge and understanding, you know, people can be taken advantage of. And that's really why all of the dynamics that were placed into it, because the reason I'm able to speak on it is because we've seen so many cases of this occurring. It's an epidemic, and it happens pretty frequently in the Lukumi tradition, unfortunately. But it happens in Isese too, because I don't understand how now, after tens of thousands of years, we're able to give Hand of Ifa over the phone. Wow. You know, I don't know how that's possible. There's not one scripture in all of Ifa where Orunmila gave Hand of Ifa at a distance. And forgive me, I'm going to make this point as well, because in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗲, it says that the king or the seeds of Ifa had to touch the forehead right before the life divination, which happens every time correctly. If you look at the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗿𝗁𝗍𝗃, where Orunmila wanted to initiate more priests, Babalawos and otherwise, he was left with only being able to go into jail. You know, no one else wanted to practice Ifa because they were getting money. They didn't want to study nothing. They had no motivation. So he's like, I'm going to go into the one place where people might want to get out for whatever reason. So he went into prison and he proposed the opportunity to some eligible men that, hey, I need Babalawos. I'll get you out of prison, but you got to do Ifa and you got to learn and you owe me this. And they were like, all right, we'll do it. So he took them out of jail and did Ifa to them out of jail. So my thing is that if Ifa can be done at a distance, right, and all these things can be done over the phone now, why did Orunmila himself endanger himself by going into an incarceration facility to get these men and then initiate them outside? There has never been a scripture that speaks of Orunmila giving Hand of Ifa to anybody at a distance. Please do not be taken advantage of anymore. And this happens a lot based on a community that wants to tap into Western clientele, and I understand it's very lucrative, but in a way where, you know, they're unable to because they might not have the ability to travel. So yeah, being the motherland, yes, we will initiate you over the phone. We will send Ifa through the mail. It's not real. But it is very convenient because, you know, it's a couple dollars, you know, I don't know, Cash App, Bitcoin, whatever's going on, World Remit, whatever it is, that's not a good hustle. That's not, you can charge whatever you want for a legitimate product. No one is mad at Lamborghini for charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for a vehicle. On the contrary, they are applauded. But you get exactly what you pay for. You get quality. You get legitimacy. You get a nice little certificate and a hat when you leave the dealer. Yeah. So that's another point. Very key. No Hand of Ifa or deities over the phone or through the mail no more. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁 says you have to be there when the blood is spilt because it has to be touched to your head. It's just that simple. So accommodate, you know. So
no virtual.
Absolutely not. Now, mind you, some people may say, well, Joseph, all your readings are practically virtual. This is true. But when you look at the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝘁𝗲 of 𝗃𝗏𝗏 and 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁, where Orunmila was able to consult people at a distance with the chain, yes, absolutely. But these are transitional readings. This is basically us identifying what is it that Earth wants from you, and we're going to offer it in your name. Like in the 𝗿𝗲𝗹 of 𝗃𝗏𝗏, where 𝗃𝗏𝗍 was Inle and 𝘃𝐶𝗪's mother, and she went to visit Orunmila to see how she could save them, but they didn't want to come and get the reading, and he was able to read them through her and perform 𝗵𝗏, and thus, save them. And some people say, well, give them Hand of Ifa through their mom. 2 different oris. It's for readings and quick resolutions. But nothing of worth or of, not of worth, forgive me, but of note or legitimacy can be done at a distance. You have to be present, Now at 𝗃𝗏s and random readings and things like that, yes. But initiations or actual deities, you must be physically present. There is no way around this. The Ifa is the oldest world tradition in a very new technological age, but these are things, certain aspects of it are not going to evolve because they're perfect. We have no reason to adapt to technology. On the contrary, technology is adapting to Ifa. That's why you see all these apps and things like that. But at the end of the day, Ifa is a real religion. It's not just a religion. It is a real religion. Like, it's actually real. This is nature. This cannot be circumvented. This cannot be disregarded. There are things here that still have to happen the way they happened when Orula was still on Earth. So be careful, because we've seen so many cases of people taken advantage of, or people who are dissatisfied and ultimately displaced spiritually because, it's kind of a free-for-all right now. So we're not trying to police anybody. I'm not trying to save Ifa. I don't want to be misconstrued. That's why I never critique anyone on anything they do. It's not my business. Ifa in the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗁 says, let them keep destroying the world like the knife and let us keep repairing the world like the needle. So when I see things on TikTok or whatnot, because, I'm a social media guy from time to time, I may see some horrendous things. Orula told me and told all of us, the way you're going to change the world is from within. Are you leading by example? I'm not here to police nobody. I'm not here for none of that. Absolutely none of that, because no one needs to police me, So everybody just needs to mind their business, study, and we'll be okay. But don't try to save the world, because Orula couldn't. Orula said, it's time for me to die. I couldn't save any of you guys. So the next time I come back, I'm not going to waste my life trying to reteach y'all something that I thought I left in plain English or whatever language, and you guys are still doing the wrong thing based on greed or whatever else. So the people that are trying to police Ifa and all these other things, it's for naught, because the same thing's going to be happening and you're going to waste your life. So I'm not doing that. So thank you for watching the channel. It's just that simple.
Okay. Well, you mentioned traditions earlier, but I think this part is
our greatest
tradition. It's showing love to the people who show love to you.
The best.
Yeah. Our members, man. Right under this video, there's a button that says join. You click that button and join. There's 3 separate tiers, all offering each individual perks, whether it's extra shows, early releases, discounts on merch, you name it. So this one, I'm just going to show love to the people who have been here the longest.
Oh, the OGs.
The OGs. The OGs. Triple OGs. First one up is Lulu Sprendel Healy.
Oh, man, yeah.
23 months.
2 years.
So 2 years.
Thank you since the beginning.
Mel T.
Oh, yeah.
2 years.
Shout out. Wow.
Kenya Hutton. 2 years.
Familiar name. How you doing, Kenya?
Robert Cifuentes Jr. He is definitely an OG.
Big Rob.
Always in the chat. 2 years.
Yeah.
We got Marco Antonio.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
2 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Laja Rocks.
Thank you.
2 years. And Queen.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course. Shout out to all of the OGs, the members on all the different tiers. If you know anybody that could benefit from the membership program, please let them know. Like Phil said, a lot of exclusive content and great things to learn from. botanicacandlesandmore.com is up and running for all service and product needs. We do ship. If you're interested in furthering your Ifa Orisha education, check out our 4-week curriculum on entry-level Ifa knowledge, or the Mojuba class, which is doing splendidly. If you can't catch us on YouTube, be sure to listen to us on all those major platforms, iHeartRadio, etc. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, share. Big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast, and until next time, see the light.